Finding the perfect project manager isn't easy. But at Upwork, we found him. He's in Adelaide, between his color-coordinated sticky note collection and the cutest boxed lunch we have ever seen. And you can find him right now on Upwork.com. When the world is your workforce, finding the perfect project manager, designer, developer, or whomever you may need tends to fall right into place. Find top-rated talent who can start today on Upwork.com.
Waiting for this light to turn green. I'm headed to work for a boss so mean. I'm gonna be late. She's gonna be...
There are some things we should do alone, like sing in your car.
If this light doesn't turn, I'm gonna scream.
But when you gamble, you should always do it with others, because gambling with friends helps keep things in check. So go to keepitfunohio.com for more tips like this. Keep it fun, keep it social, but you're singing? Maybe keep that to yourself.
Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
I came into this week expecting to finish up first pass, roll into pass two, start moving some bodies around. But it's been kind of a busy morning. On one morning, it's afternoon. It's kind of a busy day. There's the word. There's the one. Been kind of a busy day in one key storyline. And so I thought I'd do something a little bit different. And to that, and I hope I am not sued for this, I say the following. Time, space, reality. It's more than a linear path. It's a prism of endless possibility where a single choice can branch out into infinite realities, creating alternate worlds from the one you know. I am the Fantasy Basketball Podcaster. I am your guide through these vast, new Kevin Durant realities. Follow me and ponder the question, what if? Yep, I had to rewatch that opening to remembering the Jeffrey Wright monologue. I don't know if you guys caught the Marvel animated series What If on Disney Plus last year. Shout out to their opening. Yes, completely stolen. Credit. Want to give all the credit so that there's no problem here. I didn't write that myself. I just changed a couple of words for comedic purposes. I don't know how these rules work. So hopefully that was enough to make sure that everybody knows that I'm not trying to steal this as my own. However, it's time to play a little what if. Because we got the report this morning from Shams stating that Kevin Durant met with Joe Tsai, the owner of the Brooklyn Nets, and that it was apparently a very transparent meeting to which Durant basically said, I still want to be traded, but if you are bent on doing whatever I need for you to keep me, you got to get rid of your entire front office, effectively. You got to get rid of Sean Marks. You got to get rid of your head coach, Steve Nash, because I don't like the direction this team is headed. And just moments, and I never thought that I'd be happy that I couldn't do today's show until dinner time. But just moments before going on air, Joe Tsai responded on Twitter with the following, quote, our front office and coaching staff have my support. We will make decisions in the best interest of the Brooklyn Nets, end quote. Which feels pretty strongly on the side of Marks and Steve Nash. And the problem for Joe Tsai and the Nets was now, even if they had any inclination of dumping Nash or Marks, which felt far-fetched. It always felt like Sean Marks was pretty well locked in. Steve Nash, maybe a bit more of a tenuous hold. He was a first-time head coach. I don't know how you'd argue it's going so far because he's had the most drama in his organization of anybody since, like, Kobe Shaq era Lakers, probably more. But regardless of all of that stuff, if you're the Nets now, you can't possibly take Kevin Durant's side, even if, by all accounts, he is more valuable to the future of the franchise than Sean Marks and Steve Nash, at least certainly over the next 3 seasons, because a Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving core still has the chance to make that team a title contender. But as an organization, as an owner, you cannot capitulate to a player, star level or otherwise, basically going full, kicking and screaming diaper mode over every single person above you in the organization. I mean, if he would have asked Joe Tsai to go give the team to somebody else, it seems like Kevin would have. I have extremely mixed feelings about this because you guys know I hate when a player asks for a trade 1 year into a 4-year extension. It's just so disingenuous. I have no problem, oddly enough, and I don't like the way he did it, but I don't really have a problem with the way that James Harden asked out. He was in Houston for a really long time. And eventually he was like, look, this just isn't going to go anywhere. We got to try something new. Fine. Anthony Davis, a little bit less cool the way that they pulled that whole thing off, but he was there for a while, and they just... What did they get? They got him, Jrue Holiday? And that was about it? There have been plenty of instances of players demanding trades where I didn't feel like it was that big of a deal. It felt like a player gave a certain amount of time, energy, respect to an organization. It didn't work out. They asked out. 1, 2 years, whatever, left on a contract. It felt like more of a, all right, it's time. It's time. I've been extremely disappointed with the way Paul George asked out of Oklahoma City. Big party, whatever it was. I forget what this story would have been less dumb if I could remember the name. Was it Nas? I feel like it was a Nas party that the Thunder players threw and attended where Paul George announced he was coming back, run it back, whatever it was, unfinished business, signed his 4-year extension with Russ, and then less than a calendar year later, oh, by the way, I need out. I'm going to the Clippers. Kawhi asked me to join him, and I like Kawhi more. And he completely decimated the Thunder roster in the process. They sold off Russ, which ended up being a really good decision for them because we've seen his fall from grace, but Paul George is still a very good player, even if he can't stay healthy. And the Thunder have gone now into a multi-year full teardown, mega tank mode, and they have all the assets in the universe, but great for assets, horrible product for fans to watch the last couple seasons. Brooklyn has the advantage here of, they're going to get a ton of stuff back for Kevin Durant. They're not going to go into full rebuild because Kyrie sounds like he's willing to play out a year there. They have Ben Simmons, should he ever take the court again. They have some useful basketball players. They'll still be at least a mildly competitive team in the Eastern Conference. Depending on what they get back, they might even be a little bit better than that. Still, it just feels like such a crap way for this thing to go, and I just don't... It's a horrible look for Kevin Durant, I think. And you guys can feel free to disagree with me on this one. I almost always take the player's side in disagreements with a team, a front office, an ownership, whatever it might be. This is sort of like the one carve-out I've made, which is player signs $200 million 4-year extension, commits himself to an organization, to building with an organization, and then demands out. Now, the really silly part of all of this is that the one reason I could have said, okay, fine, to KD's demand was if it came out that he went into this meeting with Joe Tsai, and they came out and Kevin was like, look, I hate what's happened around me in Brooklyn. I don't like what Kyrie's been doing. I don't like the James Harden situation. I don't think Ben Simmons cares about playing basketball. I don't trust any of the players around me, but he can't do that. So then what? You got to blame it on Sean Marks, who committed to KD and Kyrie, and KD got hurt. They signed him while he was hurt. And then Irving's had the whole vaccine thing, and James Harden was fat and didn't get along with Kyrie. That doesn't really feel like a Steve Nash problem. Problems, though, he may have as a head coach, This, to me, just looks terrible, and for Kevin Durant, and somehow now he looks like the more finicky star in Brooklyn. How is that possible? So I pivot back around to the, dare I say, hilarious intro that I did on today's podcast, and I ask you all, what if? Because I think this is a really interesting opportunity to explore the nuances of handicapping trades. We're going to have to do it at some point during the season. We try to do it live during our trade deadline show every February, and this is an opportunity to kind of do it as part of our How the Sausage is Made section of the year. By the way, this is off-season episode 86. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. I'm Dan Besbris. This is a sports ethos presentation. What's happening, everybody? Dan here. I am so excited to tell you about what is arguably the coolest partnership we've ever had here on Fantasy NBA Today, and that is with the good folks over at Trend Him. Trend Him. It was founded back in 2007 and has high-quality and affordable accessories for men. Basically everything you could wear other than the clothes. When I'm like, my mind is blown right now. I got a personalized watch with a picture of my two kids on the inside. And obviously the watch is super sleek, but having my kids on the inside is amazing. I was able to get a few belts. I replaced my wallet. I got some ties. This is so cool. I was so excited to roll down to the UPS store and pick up the package that the guy that was running the store was like out getting a sandwich, and I just sat out front for 10 minutes. Check them out. Again, Trend Him is the company. Trend Him. They personalize, as I just mentioned you. The prices are great. Amazing value for your money. Amazing value. And over 6,500 different products in 22 different categories. You can check out the link in the show description. That's probably the easiest way to find them. Or go to trnd.hm. So Trend Him, but take out the vowels. trnd.hm/hoopball. So our old website name, trnd.hm/hoopball, and get 15% off your order. Again, you can just go to the URL in the show description. That easy to find on whatever service you're using to listen to today's show, or go to trnd.hm/hoopball, get 15% off your order, and check out some of the amazing stuff they've got over there. You're going to love it, I assure you. When it comes to the big game, every second counts, especially if you're missing even a moment of the action to go on a drink run. And if you're like me, you don't want to go out anyway. Maybe it's a big game you're missing. Maybe it's just, I don't really want to change out of pajama pants. Luckily, there's Drizzly, the #1 app for alcohol delivery. With Drizzly, you can shop local stores and compare prices on the biggest selection of beer, wine, and spirits. And you know you've been consuming them over the last couple of years. And the best part, you can get them delivered in under 60 minutes or schedule them 2 weeks out. Talk about a slam dunk. See what I did there? Drizzly also makes it easy to send the gift of alcohol right to your friends and family for any occasion, even if that occasion is rubbing it in their face when their team loses. You know me, I'm a pragmatic sort. We'll order it when it's winning time. In your face, other team, nah. In our face, drinks. So if you're looking to spend more time watching the game, download the Drizzly app. That's the easiest way. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com. Do it now. And today we answer the question, what if Kevin Durant goes to the team that right now seems like the most likely suitor, which is the Boston Celtics? What do we think the Nets get back? What does Brooklyn's roster look like right now? And how does that change based on who comes back in the trade? How does the Boston Celtics roster adjust if a trade goes down? And I know what you're thinking. Dan, this is an intense waste of our time because we don't know that this is going to happen. I just think it's kind of fun. It's August 8th. It's a fantasy basketball podcast, so let's have a little fun. Currently, right now, the trade or the rough framework of a trade with Boston is Jaylen Brown. He's the centerpiece. The Nets seem to also want Marcus Smart and a whole bunch of picks. And I'm not going to worry myself about the picks because we're handicapping fantasy basketball. And so to that end, this means that now more players would be headed to Brooklyn, seemingly, at least more high-minute guys. I guess there's a chance that someone like a Joe Harris comes back and maybe the minutes even out. But more high-minute guys right now seem to be headed towards Brooklyn in such a trade. Marcus Smart played 32 minutes per ball game. Jaylen Brown was at 34. My eyes freaked out inside my head for just a second there. 33.6 for Jaylen Brown. Took 18.5 shots per ball game. Marcus Smart took about 10. If you look over on the Brooklyn side, Kevin Durant took 20 shots per ball game, played 37 minutes per game, if you're wondering why he ended up getting hurt at some point last year, and obviously is just an unbelievable basketball player. So look at this first from the Boston side. What happens to the Celtics if Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown are on their way out, and Kevin Durant is on his way in? Well, first and foremost, it changes the starting lineup in kind of a weird way, because the Celtics then have a choice. Does Jason Tatum slide down and play shooting guard, which was Jaylen Brown's starting spot for the Celtics last year, and they keep a Robert Williams, Al Horford center power forward mix, and then KD becomes the small forward in what now is basically 3 7-footers starting for Boston on that team, although, again, pretty different ones? Or does Horford have no choice but to move to the bench in this new iteration, and the Celtics actually have to move a couple of guys into the starting lineup because they traded away 2 starters and then have to bench a third? My guess is because of the way the Celtics are configured, they probably try to keep Horford and his excellent defense in the starting lineup. There's still a very real chance that it doesn't work. And then they go to something like a Malcolm Brogdon, Derek White, Jason Tatum, Kevin Durant, Robert Williams starting 5, with Horford as kind of the primary coming off the bench, along with everybody else that they've got kicking around on that team. But I think for now, and this is a situation that we got right on the podcast last year. A lot of folks were talking about how Al Horford was going to play a very small backup role in Boston. I said, I don't think so. He's going to be their best defender from a positional standpoint, and they wanted him. And then he got in there and he played a whole bunch. So my guess would be that the Celtics probably go big before they go super small, at least in their starting lineup, which then only means they have to replace one starter. And basically that would be the point guard. So the choice becomes either Derek White or Malcolm Brogdon. It's probably Brogdon based on his offensive ability. And Derek White ends up coming off the bench as kind of a backup 1 and 2. Maybe even more of a backup 2. Peyton Pritchard, probably the backup point guard in that scenario. So what does that mean for fantasy value on the Boston Celtics? Again, we're just playing a game of what if today. That's why I did the whole silly intro. For Time Lord, it means very little, because his job is at center, and there's kind of no moving him around from that spot. He's not like Horford, where he could slide down and play the 4 from time to time. We do know that he's dealing with knee stuff, but it doesn't really change the calculus of whatever we thought of him before. You probably continue to think of him then. For Jason Tatum, there's almost no way to see this other than a slight downtick, because he goes from being the premier offensive player on the team to the second best offensive player on the team. Remember, our goal in this podcast is generally to simplify the equation. And in this case, simplifying the equation is just to say Jason Tatum took 20.5 shots per game. Jaylen Brown took 18.5. Marcus Smart, 10. Those 28.5 shots are not all going to go to Kevin Durant. But when you now create the hierarchy on this team, Malcolm Brogdon, you slide him in, he almost definitely takes all of Smart's 10 shots. You might even argue he takes more because he's better on offense. And then KD takes another 18 to 20, and I don't know that there's 21 shots left over for Tatum anymore. Sure, they'll say all the right things. This is still Jason Tatum's team. I'm Kevin Durant. I just came in. I'm the new guy in town, but he's better on offense for at least the next year or two, I would assume. So for Tatum, who was number 15 this last year, and we keep looking at him, he's so durable, and there's room for him to grow in field goal percent, in defensive stats. We've seen him do a little bit more than he did this last year. You have to adjust that down based on a likely slight downtick. Might only be 5%. It might be something very small, like 1 shot per game that goes away, but that's enough to make a difference. Adjust him down. He'll still be durable, one would assume, but no longer do you have eyes on him being like the number 11, 12 guy in fantasy. You probably are thinking, all right, 18 is probably per game, more like a better best case scenario in that spot. Luckily for us, no matter what we say in this what-if game, Kevin Durant's going to be Kevin Durant no matter where he goes. You do, I think, have to adjust things down ever so slightly if he goes to a team where he doesn't have to do everything. Because he kind of had to do everything for Brooklyn this last year. Kevin Durant was it, especially after Harden got traded. The rest of these guys were kind of scrap heapers. Sorry. I mean, they kind of were. Like, these guys weren't going to be taking a ton of shots, and KD needed to play 37 minutes a game to keep them in it. If he ends up in Boston, I mean, it's a different situation in Toronto. They play their guys 37 minutes a game. Boston's not looking to play their guys that many minutes unless they absolutely have to. Jason Tatum is the youth on that club, and he got to 36, which is a lot. So I think you'd have to assume that KD getting to 36 would also kind of be the uppermost echelon. And yeah, it's not going to change what he does that much. 37 to 36, it's not even a 5% drop-off, but 2-3%, just little bits like that. Maybe you take him from number 2 per game to like tied for number 3. But he's still Kevin Durant, and he probably gets better looks in Boston with better players around him in such a scenario. And his usage will still be plenty high, and he'll still pass, and he'll still rebound, and he'll still can threes, and he'll still score a ton hyper efficiently. He's Kevin Durant. I will say, though, despite the fact that I think Al Horford would still have the starting job on that Boston team and KD would play small forward, I do think you'd have to adjust the expectation down a little bit on Big Al, simply because at a certain point, the Celtics just become too large. They have good guards that they would want to get into their lineup if one of the wings is the guy who disappears and they don't really get a traditional wing back. You have to lean one direction or the other. So maybe Horford, maybe not a top 50 guy next season. He might not be a top 50 guy next season anyway, although it's hard to see a lot of slowdown with him. Maybe the blocks come off a tad. The other stuff is relatively sustainable for Big Al, but ever so slight downtick there. And when you look at guys like Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon, who right now I don't think are even on the map in terms of a discussion because Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown are still there as 1, 2, and 3 range players. You move those guys out and you bring in a 3-4 type guy. It does open up a lot of minutes on the guard and the smaller wing, which is where you'd find those dudes. So then Brogdon, who to me is not a draftable player, and Derek White, who is also not a draftable player right now, they move back into the discussion of, all right, well, where are these minutes going to come from? If KD basically just takes Jaylen Brown's minutes plus 1 or 2 more, you're talking about basically 30 unaccounted for minutes on this team. And maybe that's Brogdon coming in, who was expected to play, 22, 23, and Derek White was going to be in that 22, 23 range. That still leaves some 8, 9 untapped minutes that probably generally go to those dudes. And it's possible that Pritchard plays less even than 14 minutes a game now that Brogdon's in town. Still not someone I would target, either one of those guys, but they go from undraftable to late round flyer types. What about over on the Brooklyn side, which I know we did Boston first, but maybe the Brooklyn side is even the more interesting team because they are such a strange mishmash right now. Ben Simmons, if he plays, he'll have a big job. Kyrie Irving sounds like he will play. He'll have a pretty big job. Seth Curry should. It's not even clear who the starting center on this team is. Is it Nick Claxton and then Aldridge would come off the bench behind him? Is LaMarcus Aldridge even still technically under contract? Doesn't matter. Point is, the guys coming in would have a pretty good avenue to playing time. And we'll kind of find out more about someone like a Joe Harris as everything moves into position. But the reason the Nets would ask for someone like Marcus Smart, the reason is quite clear on Jaylen Brown. That's the guy that they would target in it. Brown would slot into a role that's not that dissimilar from what he has in Boston. He would slot in as the second fiddle offensively behind Kyrie Irving. You don't have to worry too much about Ben Simmons because even when he's hyper engaged on the offensive side, he's still only taking 10, 11 shots per ball game, something like that. So not a really big deal. Smart moves in as almost like the only point guard on the roster, unless you count Simmons there. Kyrie, he'll play point, but he's more of a scoring guard. Patty Mills, same kind of thing. Like, these are not pass-first guards. I don't know that Marcus Smart is either necessarily, but he's defense first. And you've got Brooklyn in a little bit of a roster crunch in the way that Boston ended up with too many big men and then too many small guys. Brooklyn ends up with kind of too many small to just under big. It's not a real term, and no real clear situation in the large guy part of the equation. My assumption would be that Kyrie Irving and Marcus Smart would be the starting backcourt. Ben Simmons and Jaylen Brown would be the starting 3 and 4 in some iteration. Probably Brown 3 and Simmons would start at the 4. And then Claxton is probably your 5, although maybe Aldridge gets the job to space the floor a little bit. And if Joe Harris is healthy this year, that's where things get a little bit murky. Would you move Simmons to the 5? Would you move Marcus Smart to the bench? That's something that would probably have to work itself out as the season comes into focus. But either way, I think Harris would play a pretty good-sized role because they would need his floor spacing. And Seth Curry, kind of the same general story. Do they lean his direction at all for floor spacing? It's not good news. That's the short version in all of this. It's not good news for the guys that would then be the former Boston Celtics. Would hurt Jaylen Brown less because he's more of a feature offensive guy. I believe it would hurt Marcus Smart more because you have all of these other smaller players. Seth Curry needs minutes. Harris, if he's healthy, would need minutes. Kyrie, obviously. Mills, who they re-signed. That's to say nothing about, someone like a TJ Warren took a flyer on, Cam Thomas, the young guy. Do those dudes see playing time at all? How much of a downtick? It remains to be seen for someone like a Marcus Smart. Jaylen Brown probably can still hang out in the 60s in per-game value in 9-cat. But Marcus Smart getting to 80, which it took him 32.5 minutes per ball game. He had 6 assists this last year, 1.7 steals. He needs to be on the floor a lot to get to those markers. And there will be games where, if they need scoring more, he wouldn't be the guy. That's not to say I don't think he's going to get a decent amount of playing time there. 27 to 33 minutes per game is all well within reach. But even a slight downtick takes him from, number 80 per game in 9-cat is still a valuable fantasy player. Barely, but it still is. A drop-off of even 1 to 1.5 rounds at that spot, and suddenly you're talking about kind of the, okay, this is my head-to-head durable guy that I'm kind of excited about near 95, 100. But in Roto Games Cap, that guy's hanging on by a thread. A couple bad weeks, and I'd rather flip him out for somebody who's more of a hot streamer type. And if such a trade went down, Marcus Smart is someone you'd probably want to look at because his fantasy game The steals, the assists, stuff like that. It is translatable. Seth Curry becomes a much tougher sell. Love his percentages, but if he's not getting 12 shots a game, what good are they to me? Because he doesn't get rebounds, assists, steals, blocks. He's points, field goal percent, free throw percent, and threes. Those things are fully dependent on him shooting. If he's not out there, he played 33.5 minutes a game last year, split between different organizations. If he's not out there getting shots, because Jaylen Brown took most of KD's shots, Marcus Smart took the rest, and then some others. And again, Patty Mills is still there, and Joe Harris potentially comes back. He and Seth Curry are sort of redundant. They're excellent three-point shooters, high percentage floor spacers. That's a very useful commodity in the modern NBA, but you can only play so many of them if they're not doing a bunch of other stuff as well. And I like both of those players. This is just like pragmatic fantasy outlook. How do you fit them both into that team? Second unit with Ben Simmons, that would work. Ton of floor spacing, let Ben go crazy. When Kyrie's out there with Jaylen Brown, they probably wouldn't need it as much. You could sacrifice a little bit for defense on Marcus Smart if you needed to. Patty Mills, I mean, honest to goodness, I don't even know how he plays. He's like those guys, but slightly lower shooting percent. What's the point? A lot of redundancy there. Which does sort of beg the question of why Brooklyn's like, we need Marcus Smart too, other than we value him higher than the floor spacers we have so far. Marcus Smart is not as good of a shooter as those guys. But maybe they feel like they would need his defense. He obviously would make them better, and it almost feels like they're doing it just to try to make Boston a little worse, and that's okay. And that answers our first what if here on this we stole from Disney Plus beginning of the week on Fantasy NBA Today. Tomorrow we will do, I guess there are two other teams that are very much in the mix. Toronto is one. Who the hell am I forgetting? Guess it doesn't really matter for today's episode. There were two other teams I wanted to do this to, and for whatever reason, my brain has gone into devouring itself mode. What was it? Whatever, I'll figure it out. It's Toronto and somebody else, and then we'll play a little what if, and then we'll get back into first pass, second pass, and a little more buckets. I don't know. I just thought it'd be fun. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a silly way to spend a Monday, but whatever. Show's out so late, so badoop. That's what you get. I'm Dan Vespers, at Dan Vespers on Twitter. Recruiting time here. Sent a bunch of recruiting tweets out about different things. If you want to cover, this is kind of fun to say, if you want to cover a team podcasting-wise in any of the major sports, hit me up. Provided we don't already have someone covering that team. Looking to expand quickly, rapidly in that area. And on the podcast side, it's really easy to get started. But we're looking for folks that want to do it as more than just a passing fad. Not just like, I'm going to talk about this team once every couple of weeks. No, we're talking about, like, if you want to do a podcast about a team, you are a beat podcaster. You cover them. There's a lot that goes with it, but it's fun. I already got dibs on the Dodgers. You guys know about that. So come up with something else, you copycats. Okay, 86 shows in the offseason. Dunzo. And we get our answer to the question, what if the Boston Celtics? On to tomorrow. We'll talk to you then.
Finding the perfect developer isn't easy, but at Upwork, we found her. She's in Prague, between the ideal cup of coffee and a truly impressive synthesizer collection. And you can find her right now on Upwork.com. When the world is your workforce, finding the perfect project manager, designer, developer, or whomever you may need tends to fall right into place. Find top-rated talent who can start today on Upwork.com.
Waiting. waiting for this light to turn green. I'm headed to work for a boss so mean. I'm gonna be late. She's gonna be...
There are some things we should do alone, like sing in your car.
If this light doesn't turn, I'm gonna scream.
But when you gamble, you should always do it with others, because gambling with friends helps keep things in check. So go to keepitfunohio.com for more tips like this. Keep it fun, keep it social, but your singing? Maybe keep that to yourself.